Good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure and honour to be with you again, Your Holiness. We're going to have a conversation now about compassion, love and ethics, and then after our chat we're going to invite some distinguished panellists to the stage. To begin with, Your Holiness, I've just been reading your book, Ethics for the New Millennium. In your book you wrote how you lost your freedom at 16, lost your country, or you became a refugee at the age of 24, and you have faced a great many difficulties in your life since then. But you've been able to maintain a great deal of peace of mind. Tell me how you have managed to do that.
I think utilize my intelligence or common sense realistically, then problem there, and let myself be happy. If you see, the problem, only the problem, then more frustration. On this planet, there are really, you see, sad events almost every day, not only our own sort of case, but everywhere. But at the same time, on this planet, I just mentioned basic human nature, because where our life starts, we received maximum affection from our parent, particularly from our mother. So, there are some scientists, there are serious sort of experiment. Many of them now confirm basic human nature is more compassionate. So that's the source of my happiness. There's a problem. But still, 7 billion human beings, you see, everyone have the potential of affection. And then, although you see killing, these things, violence, these things, very sad. And also I think the huge gap, rich and poor, these are very, very sad. But still, overall, I think humanity, I feel there are more positive things there. And then time passes. I think human being now becoming, I feel, more sort of mature way, more mature, and looking some deeper level of our nature and deeper level of, the source of happy life. And previously, people, simply money, material facility, is the ultimate source of happiness. Now many people begin to feel there is limitation about the material value. So these are, I think, really, positive sign. I always look like that. And then I lost my own country. But I often used to telling, because I become refugee, and firstly, I think large number or around 150,000 Tibetan refugees. You see, one way, very sad, but one way, that sort of sad event brought us different opportunity. And then myself, also you see, because I become refugee, now a lot of opportunity meeting with people from different background. It's the best way to learn more different experiences. Like that. So I'm thinking this line, then I can maintain, right? Quite a happy mood. The occasionally bad mood.
How important is it to have that peace of mind to accept things you can't change, to accept there are things you can't change?
Right. There is an 8th century, a great Buddhist scholar, also logician. So he expressed the rough translation, something like this: when you're passing through some difficult sort of situation, something like a tragic situation, then analyze the situation. If the situation, you see, something possible to overcome, right, then no need worry, make effort. If the situation no way to overcome, then no use too much worry. Very realistic, isn't it? So this is something, I think something very good advice. I also do that. For example, when my teacher, very, very beloved teacher, main teacher, of course there are many, many teachers, but main teacher is when he passed away. I really, and then also you see, when he got some stroke, right? I was in Switzerland, in Davos. Yeah. I received information. One of my best friend, one spiritual sort of my teacher, he died all of a sudden. Then my main teacher get some kind of stroke. I really was shocked. I received that sort of message. I was in Davos. Then think, now already happened. Nothing can be done. Then eventually, my teacher passed away. Till that great teacher remained there, I feel something solid rock, which I can lean with. Now, when he passed away, now no longer. Very sad. But that sadness, I try to translate, bring more enthusiasm, more determination. Now, all responsibility on my own shoulder. I must fulfill my beloved teacher's wish. So, you see, that sadness has transformed some kind of the source of strength, like that. That I think we everybody, see, one of your dear friend or something passed away, then think, if more you have close connection with that person, then more you have the responsibility to fulfill that person's wish. So demoralize and the sadness, it's the failure. Our life, more or less, I think, difficulties, problems, bound to face. Then much depend your own self-confidence and use human intelligence maximum way, and should be realistic. Something as an unrealistic expectation, that also source of problem. So should be realistic in order to know, in order to carry realistic life, right? Realistic sort of effort. We should know the reality fully. So from one angle, you can't see the reality. We must use this human intelligence, try to look from 3 dimension, 4 dimension, 6 dimension. Objectively, you should not involve your wish or your fear without that. Just analyze the situation, the reality. Once you get the full sort of knowledge about the reality, then your effort becomes realistic. So these are very important. So often I expressing those people who believe Creator, then the Creator's best gift is our intelligence and warm-heartedness. And then those people, like myself, Buddhism, Jainism, and another ancient Indian tradition, that is Sankhya-ism. You see, no concept of creator, but ourself as a creator. So our theory, our philosophical view is self-creation, like that. So thinking is,
Buddhist tradition says values compassion over attachment. Can you just explain the difference between love and compassion and attachment, how different love is from attachment?
Love, affection, two levels. One, more or less biological factor. That's very much mixed with attachment. So that biased love, essentially very much sort of mixed with attachment. That very much oriented about others' attitude. So that kind of love only towards your friend. That kind of biased love cannot extend towards your enemy. So instead of love, hatred, anger come. Now that biased love, due to biological factor, that take as a seed, then use our intelligence. We are a social animal. Now today, 7 billion human beings is basis of our future. So, thinking, the rest of the humanity is the basis of my own future interest. And then, more than that, according to your own experience, 7 billion human beings all want happy life and have a right to achieve happy life. So I always telling, mentally, emotionally, physically, 7 billion human beings, same. Everyone have a right as much as you have right. So therefore, then think that way, on that level. So on the basis of sense of oneness of 7 billion human beings, then you can develop sense of concern of the well-being of 7 billion human beings, then including your enemy. So from that kind of sort of attitude or understanding, then your sort of sense of concern or affection, that now the secondary level, right? Another level of affection, compassion, without attachment. That we can do, irrespective of whether religious people or non-religious people, doesn't matter. Even animal have that sort of potential, even an animal have.
How should we do that then, Your Holiness? How should we extend compassion towards someone who means to do us harm?
Yes, as far as their action is concerned, their attitude is concerned, negative, so you may take, if necessary, appropriate countermeasure in order to stop, but without anger. But as a person, you see, because that person also have every right to be a happy person. So while you are taking appropriate countermeasure, you can keep serious, compassionate attitude towards that person. That can do. Of course, these are not automatically come back. They are like automatic machine. You need effort. Even physical, sports are
Athletics. Even in athletics.
You need training and take time. So similarly, training our mind also take time and need effort. Otherwise, you see, we can develop these things. I always, I think, mentioning one sort of story. One my friend, one monk. Now his age now 90, 95 years old. He spent 18 years in Chinese communist gulag after 59. So then, early 80, like some other Tibetan, he also had the opportunity visit us, come to India. Then I have sort of casual talk as a old friend. So then he told me, during 18 years, this is some occasion he really faced some danger. Then I thought maybe danger on his life. And I asked, what kind of danger? Then he told me, danger of losing compassion towards perpetrators. So people who trained some practice of compassion, that kind of attitude. It is extremely important to keep compassion towards the person who creates problem for you. So he considered losing that is really serious danger. Like that. Of course, I have the bigger name, Dalai Lama. He just ordinary monk. As far as practice is concerned, I think his practice more, more advanced than me, I think. If I have that kind of situation, I don't know. What kind of reaction come? I don't know, really.
Your Holiness, do you ever feel angry or outraged? Do you ever feel angry or outraged?
Oh, of course. One clear example. One time in New York or New Jersey, many years ago, I think at least 10 years ago, maybe. Let's say one New York Times columnist, one lady, she came. Then I think I was in New Jersey. So she asked some questions. And then one question, she asked me, what do you want your legacy? Then I told her, I'm Buddhist practitioner. I should not think. I should not have some kind of concern about my name, my legacy. Then she shifted some other topic. Then again she asked, isn't that same question, second time. And I respond same way. Then some other sort of topic. And then again, third time she asked me that. Then I lost my temper. So after 1 year, we met, we gathered in New York. So we both laughing, you see, recall you see, that incident. Then I think last year in South India, some Buddhist group, they invited me to teach something. So I went there. When I reached there, one organizer one of my great, I'm a long-time friend, one lawyer, a Buddhist, of course, Buddhist. Then he told me, one of my previous visit, my talk about Buddhism, he told me that the audience find it very difficult to understand. So please tell very easy thing. Right? Then I lost my temper. Then I told him, oh, because they do not know, then it is something relevant to tell. If something already know, then no use to tell. I think the school class, if the teacher just repeat something the student already know, then what use? I think the student may feel boring, isn't it? Something they do not know, it is necessary, some explanation. So I showed to him my sort of a bad face. Then we, after I returned to Delhi, when we met, again he was laughing like that. So if you ask me some, may I say so, you just some stupid question, then I may lose my temper.
Well, that's 2/3 of my questions gone. Your Holiness, you spent your early life closed off, your young life as a young man, as a boy and as a very young man, closed off from the rest of the world. And after 24, you were travelling all the time, and you've seen so much of the world, particularly, wealthy countries like Australia and America. What surprised you about the way people live in these countries?
Not much. Because the previous Dalai Lama, 13th Dalai Lama, you see, he kept some books, of course, the English one, and also, you see, about, First World Wars, pictorial books. And there are many, many books. So I found, to look picture of these war events, these battleships, and then aeroplane just to start, some old type of aeroplane, these things, and then picture of New York City, London, Paris, Berlin, Rome, of course. You see, quite familiar. And then one, I think, Mr. Harry Hara, one Austrian, two Austrian. You see, actually they went to Tibet. No, they come to India for Kasoda Juti. Expedition also. I think, I don't know. Then British India caught these people and put some jail near, I think, Dehradun. So then eventually these two persons escaped from the jail and then immediately went towards north, and then reached Tibet. Then eventually, I think quite long journey from western Tibet to central Tibet. It took, I think, a lot of time. Then finally, they reached Lhasa. Then Tibetan government give these two persons, let's say, some job, like that. The one, Avshnatha, you see, he then, worked for one hydro project, and he carried some work making canal, right? The younger one, Henry Hara. Then eventually, I think they both, my mother, you see, met these both as a sort of poor to foreigner. So my mother eventually give them some sort of food or some clothes like that. Then eventually they become close. And particularly my elder brother, then they become very, very close friend. So therefore, then eventually the younger Austrian, you see, came to my place, handling some missions like that. And then eventually we become close friend. So he also is quite helpful, you see, telling, explaining about their country, their life, their culture, these things. So I think that's the main reason when I first visited Europe and then America and also the Soviet Union. That was 1979. So it's something familiar.
When you came to Western countries,
perhaps you see, one little bit sort of surprising. My first visit Europe, mainly America, that's I think 1979. Then you see, some people become my friend. So when I first meeting, one wife, and I think one or two children. Then after a few years, second visit, another wife. Yeah. Then eventually, I think a few years later, third wife. Divorce. Marry with children, then divorce, then another sort of wife, then again divorce. That's a little bit of a surprise. Although our friendship still remains as an old friend. Okay, no problem. That's his private business. I have nothing to do.
So did you think that because there is...
And then perhaps I think some, you see, chancellor or president of some big universities, naturally, that's a very big name as a chancellor. Big university, I think student, several thousand students. Something prestige, Marie. Prestige. Then some occasion when we met and spent some time, then they really expressed their real sort of inner feeling. Then, you see, too much stress and much worry, very unhappy person. Then we talk. Then eventually, one chancellor, that kind of a situation. And afterward, completely change. So that was confirmed to me. Materialistic life, all the facility, and good name, good education, and good salary, but unhappy person. So, such cases, quite a number of, say, my friend, you see, eventually I found that kind of thing. So that confirmed to me, materialistic life, you see, no guarantee to bring inner peace, inner happiness. one occasion, I met one Catholic monk in Spain, Barcelona. I was told, firstly, the organizer told me, one Catholic monk, you see, he wanted me, right, to see me. And then they explained that monk, 5 years spent some mountain behind Montserrat temple or monastery. 5 years. Hermit life. I already told by organizer. Then I met that Catholic monk. He told me he spent 5 years in hermit life, bread, tea, but otherwise very little normal meal and cold drink and some bread. Then I asked, I was told you spend 5 years in hermit life. What kind of practice? And he told me, meditate on love. When he mentioned that, in his eyes and face, something really very peaceful, very happy sort of expression. Like that. Deliberately, not much concern about material sort of value, material sort of facility, hermit life. Not 1 week or 1 year, 5 years. So, this shows inner peace is the ultimate source of happy life, happiness person, happy person. Like that. And among Tibetan also, you see, there are such sort of experience. Then many Hindus, many spiritual practitioners. Some Indian? How many Indian here? Raise hand. One Indian.
Over there, a couple more there, Your Holiness. And there.
Oh. So, the Mahakumbha Mela, in the past, I think at least 2 times I visited, I participate Mahakumbha Mela every 12 years. So then recent Mahakumbha Mela, although I decided to go there, not only just as a pilgrimage, but also I want see or meet those sadhus who spent years in a mountainous area, completely naked. So I want to see, to discuss, exchange their experience. But then finally fail because of weather, aeroplane, you see, cannot come, or chartered aeroplane cannot come. So, you see, these people, because of material thing, so looks poor, because of looks beggar, but very happy person. So like that. So I always is talking. The ultimate source of happiness is not material or not money, not depend on money or fame or modern education. Now here, because of this experience, I feel modern education basically very much oriented about material values, materialistic sort of oriented. Now this, I think, we should think seriously whether this existing education system really adequate to bring happy person, happy society. So now last several years, as a quite number of scientists and educationists, mainly in America, from America, and some from Europe. So we seriously discuss the how to add because in secular existing education, let's say some some education about inner value. So we already committed, you see, research, serious research, and also some scientists also, you see, already carry some experiment, project, okay, progress, like that. I think the Canada, the British Columbia, since some time back, they already carry some sort of experiment in their school. Then recently, at the state level, they formalize all school within state, British Columbia state. They say should include some education about warm heart, like that. So that's, I think here, Australian, also you see, you also human being. You see, you also is the same right. There's a big building and sort of also a lot of shops. I think no shop which selling peace of mind. Isn't it? If you go to these supermarket and shouting, I want to buy peace of mind, then people laughing, or people feel that person's mind is something wrong.